Well, happy Tuesday, my friends, and welcome into the PHOI Phillies podcast. A little bonus coverage for you this week. We figured home opener, big game yesterday, and a big moment for Phillies fans. Why not talk a little bit more Phillies live instead of just doing a pre-recorded video? So a little bit of extra incentive for me to talk Phillies. Hopefully you enjoy it as well. So we got about a half an hour with you today, and we're going to dive into what we saw yesterday, the atmosphere of the ballpark, what we've seen so far from this team, and most importantly, when will this team score runs off of a starter? We'll talk about all of that in just a little bit. But a Phillies win yesterday, nonetheless, a 6-1 Phillies win over the Colorado Rockies. We'll talk about Cristopher Sanchez's start, but I wanted to start today with yesterday's offensive outburst because it's become kind of a trend that the Phillies like to score runs late in the game and play late inning hero. And it's been somebody kind of different most nights. And last night it was Edmundo Sosa, it was Kyle Schwarber, it was Max Kepler, it was Nick Castellanos. But let's go back into yesterday's game because they scored 6 runs in the 7th and the 8th inning of yesterday's game after, to me, what felt like they were pretty lifeless for the first 6 innings. And I was on the record as saying I think they had an opportunity to kind of change that trend a little bit with German Marquez on the mound for Colorado. And the reason being was because he had only thrown it only made 5 starts in the last 2 years. 2023 and 2024 were injury-riddled seasons for German Marquez, and this was really his first opportunity to get back on the mound in a true game setting because spring training's great. It's good to get your feet under you, but it doesn't simulate that game setting the way that a real game would. And it's not an easy task to go up against this lineup as your first start back. You'd like an opportunity for, I talked about a soft landing for Cristopher Sanchez yesterday. And I didn't mean that in terms of like, I didn't trust Sanchez or whatever, because I inherently trust Cristopher Sanchez. But what I meant by that soft landing was that I think playing the Rockies and even the Nationals, who I think have put together a scrappy team and they're going to be good in a couple of years, they're not quite ready just yet. Having the opportunity to go up against those two teams to begin the year as opposed to starting with the Dodgers or what we perceive to be starting with the Braves, but the Braves are now 0-5 and Jurickson Profar is out for 80 games because of getting popped for PEDs. But what I mean by soft landing is the opportunity to go up against a lesser opponent to kind of get settled, get your feet under you, and then, kind of make your run into the season from there. And Cristopher Sanchez had the opportunity to do that yesterday. German Marquez doesn't because of the fact that he had to go up against the Phillies in his first start. He was excellent. I mean, he pitched 6 shutout innings, and what really stood out to me was the velocity. The velocity for Marquez was back. He was, pretty consistently 97, 98 miles an hour, and he did what he wanted for most of the first 6 innings. Worked out of a couple of, smaller danger areas, but for the most part, he was really good. They had 1 hit through the first 3. I think they had 2 or 3 hits through his 6 innings pitched. And then the Phillies got to the bullpen. And I tweeted out from the PHOI account yesterday, kind of jokingly at first. I meant this, tongue-in-cheek, but it ended up coming to fruition once again, was I tweeted out and said, well, the Phillies have gotten into the Rockies bullpen, which means they've got the Rockies right where they want them. Because the Phillies have tortured bullpens in 3 of the 4 games that they've played so far. And that was meant to be a joke, but it came to pass again this year. Kyle Schwarber hits the bomb off the ivy, but before that, Edmundo Sosa with a 2-run, 2-out double. So here's the sequence of events. 2 outs and 2 runners on. Edmundo Sosa comes up, and right prior to Edmundo Sosa coming up, the Phillies announced that they were going to pinch hit Trey Turner, and Turner gets a huge standing ovation, which was really cool to see. Draws a walk, pretty good at bat, draws a walk, and then Edmundo Sosa comes up with 2 outs and 2 runners on, delivers. A couple pitches later, Kyle Schwarber puts one into orbit, hits it off the ivy. They take a commanding lead. And then from there, Castellanos and Kepler go back-to-back in the 8th, really kind of put the ceiling touches on this thing, and they win 6-1. And what was supposed to be a save situation when Jordan Romano came in to warm up, ended up being a non-save situation for Romano, which maybe is not a bad thing after, the command was a little bit of a struggle on opening day. And he kind of allows another guy to have a soft return. And so he picks up the non-save save, if you will. And the Phillies win this game 6-1. And really what the standout conversation is going up against bullpens. And listen, they faced two bullpens that I think are going to be pretty bad this season. So let's start with the Nationals because they were the first team that they faced. Through 4 games, including the 3 against the Phillies, the Nats bullpen has an 11.2 ERA. Now, that's going to come down over the years, over the season, because, listen, they were just awful against the Phillies in those 3 games that they played. But last year, their team ERA was a 4.14, which was 20th in Major League Baseball. They also, at the deadline, traded Hunter Harvey, who pitched well for the Royals down the stretch, traded Dylan Floro, who was really good for them. And then I believe he went to San Francisco or wherever he went. He didn't pitch particularly well, but they took 2 guys out of their bullpen that were pretty good for them. They also lost Robert Garcia, who signed in Texas. And the guy that's probably their best bullpen arm so far or for this year, Derek Law, hasn't pitched yet. He's on the 15-day IL. So really all that's left from last year's bullpen that had any kind of success was Kyle Finnegan, who's been there for a billion years. And then Ferrer and Salazar, who both pitched pretty poorly in the games against the Phillies. But those 2 guys had some pretty good years last year. So if you take a look at the numbers that the Nationals have given up to the Phillies, it was 6 earned runs in 4 innings on opening day. And then in game 2, they give up 9 runs over 4 innings out of the bullpen as well. Then you turn to the Rockies. And yesterday, the Rockies give up 6 runs in 2 innings during yesterday's 7th and 8th inning, as we laid out. And the Rockies last year, across their pitching staff, were the worst pitching staff in all of baseball. In fact, they posted a 5.73 ERA last year, which was the worst in baseball by a lot. In fact, it was like almost 0.7 of a point worse than what the second worst team ERA was. And when you think about like 0.7, the difference between 5.7 and 5 flat doesn't seem like a lot, but it's 162 games pitched by the entirety of your staff. So all of your starters, all of your bullpen, all of your spot guys, all of your mop-up duty, they were 0.7 of a point worse across all of baseball than the next worst team, than the 29th ranked team. And the bullpen specifically wasn't much better. It was a 5.41, which was also worst across Major League Baseball by almost 0.6 of a point. So the same thing applies. Like the Rockies pitching staff last year stunk. And quite frankly, I think the Rockies pitching staff this year is going to stink as well. And so, yes, you face 2 bad bullpens over the course of the first 4 games. But let's think about the inverse for a second. Let's say you think that these 2 bullpens are pretty bad and you don't succeed against them and you lose the opening day or you lose yesterday 1-0. People are going to be mad. 4 games in, you're going to be mad. And so understanding that the numbers against the starters, and we're going to get into that in just a second, understanding that the numbers against the starters have not been good through the first 4 games, they've done a good job of materializing offense when they needed to. They were down 1-0 late in the game yesterday. They win that game 6-1. They were down 1-0 when Zack Wheeler left the game after 6 innings on opening day. They score 7 and win that game in extra innings. And quite frankly, if Romano's better in game 1, they don't need extra innings, and they win that game in 9. So you think about the inverse being a much worse situation than what has currently transpired, which is the fact that the Phillies are 3-1, and they've scored 22 runs off of relievers this year. So let's take a look at the entirety of the 3 games that they've scored. They scored 23 runs off of relievers in their 4 games. But in those 3 games, as we said, 7 runs on opening day, 9 in game 2, 6 in game 4. They've scored 22 runs in their 3 wins over 10 innings against teams' bullpens. That's going to change, obviously, when you face a team like the Dodgers or you face a team with a much better pitching staff and bullpen. And that's okay. And you've got to adjust from there. But right now, what the storyline is this team is feasting on bad bullpen play. Now, it's no secret that the Phillies have struggled against starting pitching this year. And so that's something that does need to correct itself, because as good as they've been against bullpens, they've been pretty bad against starting pitching. Now, on opening day, Mackenzie Gore, 6 innings, 1 hit, 13 strikeouts. He was excellent. The following game, Jake Irvin, 5 innings pitched. Now, he got hit hard, but ended up only giving up 7 hits and 2 earned runs. He was probably the worst of the 3 starters for the Nationals, and he went 5 innings and gave up 2 earned runs. So that's 11 and just 2 earned runs. Mitchell Parker, again, got hit hard at times. I think it was 8 or 9 balls were hit over 100 miles an hour off the Phillies' bats, but he gets into the 7th. He goes 6 1/3. He strikes out 5. He gives up no earned runs. So now you're up to 17 1/3 innings pitched with 2 earned runs. And German Marquez yesterday, as we brought up, 4 strikeouts, 4 hits, no earned runs, 6 innings pitched. So that's a total of 2 runs scored over 23 1/3 innings pitched. And the Phillies have struck out 24 times and only picked up 19 hits in those 23-plus innings. So, yeah, it's no surprise that, the Phillies need to do a better job of securing some runs early against starting pitching. And it's not going to get any easier tomorrow when they go up against lefty Kyle Freeland. He was really good at his first start against the Rays. He's tough on lefties. This is a lefty-heavy lineup. And so the Phillies are going to need to make adjustments and get better against starting pitching as the season unfolds. But let's think positively, bigger picture for just a second. They're 3-1. And that, to me, is the baseline conversation, because these are 2 teams that aren't expected to be very good this year. And so they're 3-1 against 2 bad teams when they're supposed to be 3-1 against those 2 bad teams. And so while there's things to improve, of course, it's 58 more games throughout the course of the season. I think they're off to a decent start. Kyle Schwarber has swung the bat well. 2 of the guys that we're going to talk about later in the show have really swung the bat well. And it's 2 kind of, I don't want to say unlikely sources. Well, one of them is probably an unlikely source, but the other one was signed to a large, at least monetary investment on the 1-year deal. And he's been really, really good. And that, of course, is in Max Kepler. So we're going to talk about those guys in a little bit as well. I also want to get into Cristopher Sanchez's start yesterday, because I thought he was really good. Velo was up. Command was decent. I think the command can get a little bit better. I think he missed some spots early in the start, but he really kind of settled in later in the game and was pretty in control for a majority of the game. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit as well. But before we continue to do that, let's pause for just a moment and tell you about some of our friends here at PHOI. And I got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best ticketing site because they offer you the best options in all of tickets. It's not just sporting events, but if you want to head down to the ballpark, maybe you're thinking about going down on Thursday afternoon for a 1:05 start, head on over to Game Time because you'll have the best options and the best seats available because you're going to know exactly what you're looking at. I've said this before. Maybe you know what Citizens Bank Park features and you know what's the good seat and what's the bad seat. I'm going to leave you a hint. There's not many bad seats in that ballpark, but maybe you're thinking about traveling with the team this summer. You're thinking about heading out to St. Louis maybe later in the summer. You want to go to Pittsburgh, or you want to go to Chicago, or maybe you're thinking about going to some of the older ballparks like up in Boston. And sometimes with older ballparks, you get obstructed views with a big pole sitting right in front of your face because that's how they constructed stadiums. Back in the day, there was just a huge concrete slab sitting right in front of a seat. And you don't want that seat. So what you're going to do is use the Game Time app to see all of the latest spots where you can sit. It's the seat view with a panoramic view from your seat before you buy your ticket. So you're going to know exactly what you're looking at heading into the game. But that's not the only feature that Game Time has. The all-in pricing feature, to me, is the best feature in all of ticket buying because you don't want to get hit with unnecessary fees or hidden fees, more importantly, when you get to checkout. The number says one thing when you go to buy the ticket, and all of a sudden, it's $90 more expensive because of fees. They give you the all-in ticket prices so you know exactly what you're going to pay at the time of purchasing your ticket. And Game Time is going to give you ticket coverage as well. If your purchase, maybe you have some issues, maybe there's a game cancellation or an event cancellation. Maybe you lost your job. They offer you some of the best protection in all of Game Time purchasing. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Once again, create an account and redeem the code PHLY for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Of course, it's Game Time. And, of course, it wouldn't be a PHOI Philly show without our friends over at Bet365 because 780,000 live-streamed events each and every year can be seen right from Bet365, and that's why they are the pioneers in live in-game betting. Lines change all the time. And in fact, if you wanted to take a look at the game yesterday, I bet you would have gotten your hometown ball club at a much better deal than what the money line opened up with to begin the game, because they didn't look like they were putting together some great at-bats. And so after the 6th inning, they're down 1-0. Maybe you want to throw a little money on the money line. Boom, you would have been a winner. And you can do that live in-game betting with Bet365. But it's not just in-game betting, it's early payouts as well. NBA and NHL early payouts. If your team that you've bet on the money line or parlay selections marked as winner, if they go up by 3 goals at any time, you win immediately, just like that. Same thing in the NBA. If your team's up by 20 points, you get an instant payout just like that. You don't have to sweat out a late game comeback or a flurry of goals down the stretch or something fluky happening. You're going to win when your team's up 3 in the NHL or 20 in the NBA. And listen, I know this is just kind of getting to the point of the season where playoffs are beginning. You want to get in on all the action, the live in-game action with our friends over at Bet365. And new customers right now get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5, win or lose. All you're going to do is sign up with the code PHOI365, deposit $10, and place your first $5 bet to get that $150 bonus bets, win or lose. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome back to the PHOI Phillies podcast here on the PHOI and All City Network. And of course, we are brought to us again by our friends at Bet365, where it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome into the chat. Molly and Barkley's Life, K-Red, Elephant in the Room, Larry's Backyard Barbecue, Alley Cat, Jamie, everybody that's in the chat, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Yes, the Braves are 0-5 and have had Jurickson and Profar popped for PEDs. Nobody in that starting lineup right now is sitting over 200. They're a mess right now. And again, listen, like we said, you could be 5-0, you could be 0-5. There's 157 games left. I think the Braves will work themselves out. They're too talented of a roster not to. But it is nice to see early in the season, your team is 3-1 and the Braves are 0-5. It does warm your heart a little bit, because I think the Braves are a good team. I think the Phillies are a good team. I think the Braves are a good team. I think the Mets are a good team. In what order you want to place them in is your prerogative. I probably would have initially gone, I did initially go Braves, Phillies, Mets. And the reasoning being was, I think when the Braves get healthy, they're probably the best roster in the division. And the reason the Mets were third was because they don't trust their starting rotation all that much. But you could put them in any order you want. I think there's 3 really good teams that all could conceivably find themselves in the postseason at the end of September. With that being said, 5 games in, it is fun to watch your rivals struggle, especially how badly the Braves have struggled offensively. And then you lose your kind of, I don't want to say premier free agent signing, but kind of your big free agent signing in Jurickson and Profar for the next 80 games because of a suspension. So Alex Verdugo is going to take a lot of time out in the outfield, which Alex Verdugo didn't get a major league deal until the Braves offered him one. And I think it was for like $1.5 million. Like, there was a bunch of dudes, and Jamie Lynch and I talked about this a lot over the preseason, or in the offseason, excuse me, was the outfield free agents were not particularly exciting. Max Kepler was a guy that Jamie and I brought up probably 3 or 4 times before the Phillies signed him because of past history of success. And I know last year was a down year, but it was primarily, I think, due to the injury. He had a hip injury, and then I think it was a knee injury. It was either knee or back was the second one. But he missed a lot of time, and I think his power was really sapped because of the injury. But when you looked around the rest of baseball, like, free agents, outfielders was kind of gross. Like, it was Kepler was a higher name guy compared to like the Michael A. Taylors of the world, the Alex Verdugos of the world. Who was the defensive outfielder from the Mets that couldn't really hit? Blanking on his name, but there was another guy. It was like a lot of guys who play good defense but can't hit. And if you're going to have a lot of guys who can't play good defense, or who play good defense but can't hit, you just have Johan Rojas, and they already have Johan Rojas. Before we continue, because I do want to, Harrison Bader, thank you, Elephant in the Room. I appreciate it. Before we continue, I do want to get to Mickey Durkin's chat comment here. Mickey says, would you look at Hector Neris? Absolutely not. I would not. And I thought Hector Neris last year I would have signed. In the offseason, I would have signed Hector Neris last year. I thought he had a pretty good year with the Astros 2 years ago. And the funny thing is, too, like, Hector Neris got DFA'd by the Cubs midway through the season last year, but he was good in the early portions of the year. He danced out of some danger, as Hector Neris tends to do. But I thought he was pretty good. I think he was in like a 3.5, 3.6 ERA. But it got worse and worse and worse and worse as the year went on. And the Cubs ended up DFAing him. And the Braves had enough of his crap after 3 days. And they brought Jesse Chavez back up for the, 804th time to replace him on the roster. And they had enough of Hector Neris. So no, I'm out on Hector Neris. Listen, I think this bullpen is going to add at the trade deadline. I think that the two most likely spots that the Phillies add at the trade deadline is in the bullpen, because all good teams always want more bullpen help. And then I think it's in center field. And I've had that conversation a bunch already, and we're 4 months away from the deadline, so I'm not going to continue to harp on that conversation. But I think that it's probably center field and somewhere in the bullpen, maybe middle towards high leverage relief. But I think that that'll come later in the year. I don't think it's going to come right this second. And if it's Andrew Painter in some capacity, whether they've outwardly said he's going to be a starter once he's here, we'll see if that stays true once Ranger Suarez gets back, or maybe Ranger Suarez becomes a weapon in the bullpen, and Painter is the fifth starter, towards the end of the season. But I think that's a conversation we'll have, throughout May and into June, and of course towards the trade deadline in July. But one guy I wanted to get to, and I don't think we're going to have time to get to Max Kepler today, so I'm going to probably do a video on Max Kepler over the next couple of days. But one guy I'm going to get to, and Ray Schumacher brings up his name in the chat, is Edmundo Sosa. And I have to give Edmundo Sosa a lot of credit. Being a bench player is a difficult task. And listen, there's varying levels of skill across Major League Baseball. I think it's the same for any sport, right? Being a bench player, being a backup goalie, being a backup quarterback, being a, seventh or eighth guy on the bench in the NBA, it's a difficult task because you never know when your name is going to get called. You don't know if you're going to go 1 game without playing, 4 games without playing. If everybody's healthy, do you go a week without playing? It's a difficult task to be a bench player, to keep your head in the game, when your number is not called upon every day or close to it. Edmundo Sosa has done a really nice job with this team since being acquired from the St. Louis Cardinals, of being a kind of spark plug type of player, when needed. And then, of course, he filled in pretty admirably for Trey Turner last year, and he's off to an excellent start this year as well. He's 6 for 11 to start the year. He's got an 818 slug. He's got a 1.4 OPS. And I know it's a small sample size, but I think he's seeing the ball really, really well. 62.5% of his at-bats have resulted in hard hit balls, and his average exit velocity through his first 4 games, or through the team's first 4 games, is almost 95 miles an hour. And I don't expect that to hold for over the course of a full season, but if it were to, that would be 5 miles an hour faster than any of his season averages to this point in his career. So he's hitting the ball harder, which is great. And again, I don't think it's going to happen for, if he plays 90 or 100 games. I'm not sure he's going to continue to hit the ball at like 95 miles an hour, over the course of 200, 300 plate appearances. But I do think he's being more selective at the plate. One of the things that is probably my biggest knock on Edmundo Sosa, especially you saw it as he played more and more, filling in for Trey Turner and then kind of filling in down the stretch, for different guys and getting more at-bats, was his chase rate. I think he chased a lot of pitches late in the season. Last year, he ended up with a 40.5% chase rate, which you just can't have happen. That's just too much, right? He was swinging out of hand far too frequently. And the funny thing is, his average this year, again, 45 pitches seen through 12 plate appearances, is actually lower than what he saw last year in his 1,000+ pitches, which was about 3.8 pitches per at bat. He's not chasing as much. He's not, I don't think he's flailing as much, and he's not getting fooled now. And he's taking advantage of pitches that have been left up in the zone. The double that he hit yesterday was a slider that was left in the zone. He crushes it to the right center field gap. The double that he hit off the wall in Washington was a slider that was left up. They tried to the righty tried to throw a front door slider. It got left up, and he crushed that one too. And so I think he's doing a good job of taking advantage of pitches in the zone, and he's also laying off of bad pitches outside of the zones. And what he's doing, I think, is allowing himself to see the baseball a little bit more into his swing. I think he's allowing it to get a little bit deeper in his swing. And because of that, he has 6 hits, and 3 of them have been opposite field hits, including the one that he had yesterday, which was the double, which was, to me, the most important swing of the game. Now, Schwarber tacked on, and Castellanos and Kepler tacked on later in the game. But to me, that double by Edmundo Sosa was the most important swing of the entirety of the game because, again, they were down 1-0 at the time, and there was 2 outs. There was a very realistic chance that if Sosa gets, pops up, grounds out, strikes out, whatever the case may be, they go into the 7th, they go into the 8th, down 1-0, and, that kind of dread of not putting anything together starts to set itself in a little bit. So Sosa's double really broke things open because it was getting to be kind of one of those murmur games at Citizens Bank Park where, you could hear conversations around you. I don't think a lot of people were as invested into the game as they were early into the game. But that swing really kind of set the tone for the remainder of the last, 3 innings or so. And it really blew the roof. No roof, of course, but the hypothetical roof, if you will, really kind of blew the roof off of Citizens Bank Park. And then Schwarber hits the ball off the wall. It smokes off the ivy, hits it like 109 miles an hour or whatever it was. And that was the end of the game. To me, right there, after Schwarber hits the home run and they go up by multiple runs, that to me was the signifier that the Phillies were going to win that game. And Alvarado was excellent in the 8th. Romano comes in and he did what he needed to do in the 9th. And they win that game because of, scoring runs off of a bullpen. And I think it started with Edmundo Sosa. It probably started with the walk from Trey Turner. Coming off the bench cold like that and drawing a walk is a difficult task. So he does that. And then Sosa comes up, picks up another hit on the game, his 6th hit of the season, and drives in the go-ahead run. And then, the Phillies kind of open up the floodgates from there. I think the one thing that's telling about Edmundo Sosa, more so than his ability to fill in for Trey Turner, his ability to step up when his number's called, and the difficulty of being a bench piece and not knowing when your number is called, is the way that his teammates think about him. I mean, you saw it on the post-game shows yesterday. He was lauded by his teammates. Kyle Schwarber had good things to say. JT Realmuto had good things to say. And I thought Matt Gelb wrote a really excellent article on Sosa yesterday. And the one quote that jumped out to me was from Nick Castellanos. And he said, quote, "The game will repay him in time for what he's given to the greater good." What that tells me is his teammates love him. He's an important piece to this ball club's success. And his teammates love him because he is that Swiss Army knife guy, because he is that call my name, I'll step up and produce type of bench piece. I think Ruben Amaro comped him to Greg Dobbs. Now, I think Edmundo Sosa is a much better defender than Greg Dobbs. He's a legitimate starting shortstop type defender. Meanwhile, Greg Dobbs was more of just come off the bench and provide you a knock. And he was an okay defensive third baseman. But Edmundo Sosa is a much better defender than Greg Dobbs. But the comp is, when your name gets called, you're going to come up in a big spot. And not only are you going to come up in a big spot, but you're going to deliver in a big spot for your team. And I think his teammates really love his ability to do that. And what I gather from Castellanos' comments there is that basically what he's saying is he's making $3 million this year. Next year is his final year of arbitration, and he's probably going to get, 4.5 or 5 or whatever the case may be. He'll get an upgrade in pay because that's generally how arbitration works. And then he's an unrestricted free agent for the first time. And I think that's kind of what Castellanos is alluding to. And whether that's here, which probably is unlikely because I do think he may get some looks as an everyday shortstop or an everyday infielder in some capacity, or elsewhere, I think he is going to get paid. He'll probably get a multi-year extension or multi-year deal, excuse me. And, I don't know how much it's going to, AAV, what it's going to look like, but it's certainly going to be more than the $3 million that he's getting this year, and probably more than the 4.5 or 5 or 5.5 that he gets next season. He's an excellent bench piece for this team that I expect to probably get interest or generate interest in the 2027 offseason, right? This year's 25, offseason will be 26. Yeah, the 2027 offseason when he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Now, maybe the Phillies think about extending him now and saying, hey, listen, I know you want a shot at being a starter, but we'll overpay as a bench piece And I don't mean right this second. I'm talking about, in the next, calendar year or so when he gets to arbitration 4. Maybe the Phillies start to think about extending him before that time comes. Certainly possible. It's also possible that he says, I'm going to take my chances and try to become a starter. But it's clear that his teammates love him, and he's produced for this team, throughout the years, whether it was filling in for Turner last year or early in this season when Turner had the back spasms. He's an excellent Swiss Army knife piece, and he can play short. He could play second. He could play a little third. They've, experimented with him in the outfield because I think Rob Thompson wants to get him more consistent at bats. Now, Max Kepler's played really well through the first couple of games in left field, so that's probably going to hinder some of his at bats in the outfield because Kepler's your everyday left fielder or close to it. But I think the Phillies are going to try to extend him some more at bats and some more opportunities, even when Trey Turner comes back. He, of course, is going to be their first right-handed bat off the bench, but I think he may get some more opportunities to start in different capacities. Maybe a spot start for Stott, a spot start for Turner, and then we'll see what happens with that left field experiment. But I think the Phillies love Edmundo Sosa, and he's delivered for them so far. Again, 6 for 11 in his first 11 at bats with 3 RBI, I think, and a couple extra base hits, 3 hits to the opposite field. He's been awesome so far through the beginning of the season. And just like that, my friends, that's going to wrap up today's show. Big thank you to everybody in the chat for being here. I appreciate you greatly, whether it's discussing Edmundo Sosa or the way the Phillies have attacked the bullpen. You guys are the best, and I can't thank you enough for joining us live. If you missed this live, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about the start to the season because, again, they've struggled against starters, but they've been really good against bullpens. And let me know what you think the future for Edmundo Sosa holds, particularly in the rest of this season, where some of his at-bats are going to come from, because I do think Rob Thompson is going to try to get him a little bit more consistent reps, even when Trey Turner's fully healthy and they're at a full healthy squad. So a big thank you to everybody. We'll be back live on Friday at 1 o'clock. We'll chat with a beat writer a content creator for the LA Dodgers. We'll talk to Jim Salisbury later in the week as well. But until that time, we're going to have a couple of videos up for you tomorrow and Thursday. I think tomorrow we'll talk about Max Kepler. Thursday, we're going to talk about Cristopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo and having 2 lefties that throw as hard as they do in your starting rotation. So we'll do that over the course of the week, and we'll talk to you live right here on the PHOI Phillies podcast at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Hope to talk to you then. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.